Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Nightmare's Edge. I have a few new terrifying tales of haunted houses. I've had a few personal experiences that I could never fully debunk, so to experience some of these events, I'm certain is quite horrifying. So thank you very much to the authors for allowing me to read your stories. I will link their Reddit handles and the links to their stories in the description below. Be sure to check them out and comment. If you have a story of your own you'd like to submit, you can email it to the email that's listed in the description. Now sit back, relax, and let me tickle those inner fears. Today's first story comes to us from Bellbete, entitled, I Grew Up in a Haunted House. My childhood home was built by my own grand-something father and has stayed in our family since forever. My mother claims that her paternal side of the family were always rather sensitive to paranormal stuff, despite trying hard to hide this. While the entire house was iffy and plain uncomfortable to live in, there was a certain room that no one could bear to stay in. It used to be my grandparents', but they couldn't handle it and decided that my aunt would sleep there. My aunt wasn't able to either and ended up sleeping anywhere but her own room. When my own parents took over, I was about 4 years old, and of course, they gave me the bedroom. Not that I knew any of this until later years. Both my parents went to great lengths in order to convince me and my brother that paranormal stuff was just made up in order to scare kids. Doesn't change the fact that I went from sleeping through the night since I was 3 months old to barely being able to sleep at all. I would complain about seeing someone scary and dangerous in my room. I still remember the pure terror I felt every single night going to bed. I couldn't sleep unless I was hidden under the comforter while facing the wall, and with a CD drowning out the noise with folk tales and Christmas carols playing in the background. After a while, my little brother started to sleep in the same room, due to his being repainted. It lasted for a couple days before my mother decided that the two of us should sleep in her room while she slept in mine. My father was away for weeks at a time due to work. She told me later that she decided to do that because my brother woke up screaming. I'm a really heavy sleeper and didn't notice, and the next day she saw bruises and what looked like scratches on his back and around his neck. She slept there that one night, but ended up joining us in her own room after. She apparently woke up unable to breathe during the night, and when she looked up, she saw someone on top of her before she was being choked by them. She really thought she was going to die, but managed to throw the thing off her before running out of the room. After that night, nobody slept in my bedroom again. Me and my brother were clueless, despite us both being terrified of what resided inside the bedroom. Our mom simply pretended that it was nice for me and my brother to share the big bed while she took over my brother's room. This greatly helped my sleep and general feeling of terror. Despite still feeling scared every night in that house, I never felt scared anywhere else. Neighbors and friends would also tell us that they saw someone in the windows of my bedroom, despite none of us being in there. None of us were even tall enough to look out the window. My dad eventually bought me porcelain dolls so they could tell the people who asked that it was probably the dolls set up on the windowsill. I never knew any of this until later on, but it got to the point that people actually started avoiding walking past our house alone because they thought it was haunted. Me and my brother, and even random kids from primary would talk about, mention, and interact with people in my home who weren't there. My mom always played it off, but you really can't do much when a random kid is asking you about the old man sitting in the chair, or when your son asks about the lady who was petting his feet in the morning. Eventually, the house burned down. Second house fire we survived. We rebuilt, and my mom had the place exorcised at least 10 times by all sorts of different people, from priests to people who claimed to be clear-sighted or able to talk to angels, and practitioners of the cult. This was done in secret, of course. When we moved back in, it was better for a while. Personally, I repressed all memories and ideas regarding anything paranormal or scary. I convinced myself that I was just afraid of the dark as a kid. I lived a couple years in ignorant bliss. But then, it started again. Little things at first. Hearing someone come through the front door, just walk up the stairs, and look around before leaving again when I was home alone. I thought it was a family member ignoring my greeting and was mightily insulted until I found at dinner that no one had been there. Then I started having trouble sleeping again, but only in my room. I never had nightmares, but I had trouble calming down enough to fall asleep. I had a big clump in my chest, feeling like something terrible would happen at any minute. My current bedroom is roughly the same place as the previous one. My toddler brother started talking to people. He had a name for one of them that he would always laugh and smile at, but there was also one which terrified him and would make him start shaking while staring transfixed and cry about mean and scary. I felt my soul leave my body the first time I held him during this. His eyes would follow movements I couldn't see. Then my cousin came to sleep over with my aunt. Only problem was he couldn't fall asleep because of those scary people chanting my initials over and over, and the man who would walk in and stare at him from time to time when he was in bed. Not my bedroom this time. Eventually, I started feeling like someone was walking into my room every night, but I convinced myself that I was just being paranoid due to the recent trouble falling asleep. Sometimes I would hear my youngest brother, at this point a young child, knock on the walls. This continued for several weeks until I asked my mom, who slept in the same room as him, why he was awake and knocking on the walls when he should be sleeping. She said that he had only done that once when she was trying to put him to sleep, but that she had put a stop to it. My brother confirmed it later when I asked him about it. I spent weeks knocking different tunes and repetitions back and forth with someone through the wall, but nobody else even heard it. I immediately quit it, and the wall I often seen as a safe space become another living thing that frightened me. It didn't take too long after that before I regularly felt someone's breath on my face after having closed my eyes trying and failing to fall asleep. I couldn't handle this and started staying awake at night to avoid it. I eventually moved out and all my problems disappeared. I didn't lay paranoid in bed waiting for shit to happen. I didn't feel scared and I fell asleep easily and peacefully. I still got my room back at my parents' place, and I've recently moved back. I thought I was over whatever the fuck was going on, but the more time I spend in my bedroom here, the more I start feeling like I used to. I can feel the staring and the breathing whenever I spend too long falling asleep at night. The heavy feeling in my chest is back, and I don't feel fully rested when I wake up, despite sleeping heavily with only good dreams. I don't want to believe in paranormal shit because I find it terrifying, but I can't explain a lot of shit from my childhood any other way. I honestly feel crazy just thinking about all this stuff, but there are so many other people who have experienced shit across my family home that I can't just ignore it, even though I'd like to. Fun fact, the rebuilt house was hit by lightning that caused a minor earthquake, which woke up the entire neighborhood. The house was glowing green, according to eyewitnesses. The second story comes to us from the OG_BG, entitled Prankster Ghost Roommate. This is my first long post on Reddit, so bear with me. I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts. Furthermore, my dad lived in the oldest house in town, which was around 150 years old, when I was in high school, and I stayed there overnight once a week. I shared a room with my half-brother who rarely slept there. My bed was against a wall that was connected to the upstairs hallway, where all the bedrooms were. There were a few weird things about the house, but the weirdest part were in my room. Above the fireplace, again, a really old house, so there were fireplaces in most rooms, we found that the wood boards were loose there and easily came out. There was a small compartment where we found some old knickknacks, but nothing too crazy. The other odd thing was that there was a metal door knocker that you'd see on the front door of houses, hanging on the door. I never thought anything of these when I chose to stay in the room, but it should have been a red flag. With the house being so old, my family would joke about the house being haunted like anybody would. You'd get the usually creepy sounds that an old house would have, but there was something off about my room. With my bed against the wall to the hallway, I could hear people walking up and down the hall. It wasn't a weird thing until I noticed that almost every night there would be footsteps pacing up and down the hall. I would bring it up to my family asking who was awake and things of that nature, but nobody ever said it was them. I tried a few times to get up and open the door to see who was walking, and there would never be anyone there. If that wasn't enough, when I finally decided that I was just imagining these noises, I started to hear someone using the knocker on my door. I responded with a hello or who's there, but never got a response. Again, I thought it was someone messing with me, but when I brought it up, everyone thought I was just being crazy. After it happened 4 or 5 more times, I finally decided to get up and look who it was. When I opened the door, there was nobody there. I didn't hear any footsteps of people running away. This is when I decided that something was really going on in the house. A couple weeks later, I woke up in the middle of the night. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary till I rolled over, eyes still closed, to face the other bed in the room. There seemed to be a light on in the room, which didn't make sense, so I opened my eyes. What I saw sent chills down my spine. There was an older man sitting on the corner of the bed closest to me in what looked like a sailor's outfit. He had a weird green tint to him and he looked right at me. Being a school night, I decided to just turn back the other way, close my eyes, and forget I ever saw it. I fell back asleep to the thought running through my head, you didn't see anything, you didn't see anything. The next morning I told my family about what happened. They were obviously skeptical, but it did give more credence to my other mentions of noises I'd hear throughout the night. To this day, I don't know what I saw, but my dad moved out of the house shortly after. It still seems weird that I was the only one experiencing something like that in the house, but I do know I believe in ghosts. Our third story comes to us from Sea Cherry 124, entitled, I had a few interesting experiences since I started using my spare room 3 months ago. A little backstory about the spare room. When I first bought my home last year, there was a family of around 13 people living in it, 6 of which were adults, 3 small bedrooms and 1 sketchy annex in the garage. A year later, and the neighborhood is still telling me stories about how awful these people were as neighbors. The annex was initially shoddy framing and drywall work, presumably installed by that family. The walls were painted a weird green color and the rug was a wrinkly, stained mess. It became apparent that someone had been peeing in all 4 corners of the room. I figured it might just be pets, but there was a mirror that had written on it in makeup, and the room was locked from outside. The day we got our keys, I got called to respond to the Seattle riots with my National Guard unit and was gone for about a month. During that time, my wife and the in-laws began renovating the home to make it livable. I felt guilty being unable to help. My wife got together with my mom to convert that scary extra room into a man cave, jam room, with all my music equipment and memorabilia. It came out really nice, but I haven't found much time to use it in the past year. A couple of months ago, I built a gaming PC and decided to set it up in that room. Now that I've been going in there almost daily, things have started to feel a little strange around the house. I get the sensation someone is standing directly behind me once or twice a day in the room. Our TV set on fire in the living room a few weeks ago. Our water main burst last weekend, causing us to dig up our yard over the course of 3 days. And my garage lights keep turning on and off. I can hear the light switch. This morning, I got out of the shower to find that my wife had already left for work. I'm coming down the hall and I hear her clearly say, "Hey babe," from the spare room side of the house. I replied, "You're still here?" To which I got silence. I looked out the front window and sure enough, her truck was gone. That's when I heard it again. "Babe, come here." I grabbed my things and noped to work, LOL. Anyway, when I pulled out of the driveway, I could hear what sounded like a girl screaming from outside, followed by a bang. I stopped before backing into the street thinking, was that my phone? I waited for a second before continuing on my way, thinking it might be the school across the street. I got about 50 feet down the road before I heard it again. This time it was faint, but sounded like it was coming from in the car. I paused at the stop sign and rolled down the windows to see if it would happen again, as it had sounded identical to the first one. Nothing. I roll up my windows and continue on my way to find that it happened several more times, almost like a recording. Same scream/bang, over and over, for another mile or so. Anyway, I'm weirded out for the day. Might sage later and bang some pans together, I don't know. Thanks for the read. TLDR, pretty sure my spare room is haunted, and I disturbed it by spending time in there for a couple of months. Heard my name get called by nobody this morning, feel a presence behind me at my desk, and heard strange recorded screams on the way to work. Our fourth story comes to us from Automatic Anxiety 739, entitled, My Childhood Home and the Marsh Next to It Was Haunted. Back in 2001, my parents bought some property to build my childhood home on the south side of Chicago. Some backstory on the property that we found out after the house was built was that the marsh/swamp on the property used to be dumping ground for bodies from the Italian Mafia in Chicago. The black tar that was in the swamp made it impossible to get out of, and the bodies just disappeared. Fast forward to when my family lived there, we had a beautiful 3-bedroom home with a wonderful yard, swing in the backyard, and a basement that my parents let us write our names all over, a huge highlight of our house as kids. In that basement, we also had a laundry room that was around the corner of the stairs, and some ballet mirrors leading to it. Ever since I was a kid, I dreaded having to go down into the basement, and always felt like someone was watching me. It was never just a kid being scared of the basement ordeal. Something truly felt off. One day I was walking down the stairs of the basement, and out of the corner of my eye, looking through the mirror, a man stood staring directly at me. He was tall, with a flat cap and a scrappy beard, plain as day. I tried to scream, but it felt like all the air was gone, just like a dream. He started coming towards the stairs, and as quickly as I could, I sprinted up the stairs and slammed the door. As a child, I was a wonderfully perpetual liar, and knew no one would believe me, so I never said a word. A few weeks went by, and I tried to put the image of the man I saw out of my head, but after that, never felt safe in the house. The scariest instance, though, was when I was grabbing something out of my parents' room, and again felt someone staring at me. For fear of seeing the man again, I began to run out of the room. The only thing was, I couldn't move. I stood there like a statue, unable to do anything except cry. I felt the pressure on my chest like someone was holding me back from moving forward. After what felt like an eternity of being frozen, I finally was able to let out a small cry, and my mother ran into the room and grabbed me. She had to yank me so hard out of that spot, as if I were a mouse stuck in a sticky trap. As we fled the room, the door slammed behind us, and my mom took me outside where I felt I was finally able to breathe. After that, we never talked about that moment. Apart from my traumatizing encounter, my sister also seemed on edge in the house. She could never sleep alone and would frequently scream in the night. This will come into play later. Another thing to note was around the house, things would move locations. Doors would open randomly, and if we all left the house, it was in disarray when we returned, as if someone was partying there. My parents never said a word to us about anything that happened, and carried on cleaning as if it was normal. Taken, my sisters and I were from ages 5 to 9 at the time, so I am sure nothing was going to be discussed. Things kept happening over the years, and I would frequently see the man staring through the windows as we came back to the house, around corners, and even sitting in a chair in our living room. Eventually, though, we had to move due to my parents losing our house in the recession, but I never forgot about the house. After we got older, we were all having dinner one night, and we were reminiscing on the old house. I brought up that moment where I was stuck in the bedroom and my mom's face turned white, as she told me she saw a tall man with a flat cap and a scrappy beard holding me there and did not want to frighten me at that time. As she described the man I saw everyone's faces drop. Apparently, we all had encounters with the man. My older sister would see him as she played dolls in the basement, my dad in his garage, my mom with me, but the scariest story was from my younger sister. When she was a child, the man would visit the edge of her bed and stare directly at her, telling her, "Get out. If you don't go, I will kill your family. You're all going to die. I will kill you." Her screams every night were not from some childhood nightmare, but an actual nightmare we all seemed to be living in. She would wake up with scratches from the man that we just assumed was from her childhood eczema. But nope, he could touch her. To this day, We never bring up the old house or drive past the street where it sits. It still terrifies me to today to think about all of our experiences in the house. I will never go back. While it will always be the home I grew up in, I truly consider it a place in hell. And our final story comes to us from STE_FFS, entitled, What's Going On in Our Flat? Me and my partner moved in this flat at the end of last January. It's a fairly new flat, part of a block of flats. First thing we noticed after a few weeks is the fridge, brand new, beeping insistently at night and changing temperature on its own, as if someone is pressing the buttons. It would stay silent all day and started beeping at night, or be quiet for weeks and suddenly start beeping when one of us was in the room. We dismissed it as a faulty item. Then we had the toaster being found plugged in the morning and hot as hell, while we were both positive it had been unplugged the night before. We moved the toaster on top of the fridge when not in use. Shoes started falling from the shoe rack in the middle of the night, same as the toilet paper. Google Nest came to life in the bedroom while no one was there and played an Italian song that I've never heard. I'm originally from Italy, while the activity log read, unknown voice said to play my favorite song. That freaked the shit out of us. We had the Xbox and the TV turning on and off on their own. I lost a t-shirt, Alice in Chains' last tour t-shirt, pretty particular, during laundry. As I was going through all the old clothes coming out of the dryer, I found some long male underwear, which neither me nor my boyfriend ever saw before. We literally went over every single nook of the flat looking for that t-shirt. No luck. 2 months later, my boyfriend is doing his laundry and surprise, the t-shirt pops up out of the dryer like nothing ever happened. Fresh as fuck. Like, last thing, 2 nights ago we were on the couch watching a movie, each at one corner, and a voice could clearly be heard in between us. I think I heard a laugh. My partner says it was more like a hello. Each of us had turned to watch the other, but none of us had spoken. We're pretty freaked out by now, but still dismissing everything as coincidences, as we're pretty rational people. Also, he keeps on having nightmares about ghosts haunting the flat, and he woke me up screaming more than once. What do you think? Should we be worried? Thanks in advance for any advice. I do hope you enjoyed today's stories, and I hope that if you have similar experiences, you know you're not alone. I also want to thank the authors for allowing me to read their stories. If you have any information to provide to the authors, you can do so through the comments, or you can email me and I'll reach out to them. But you can find their information in the description. But until next time, remember, just because you couldn't see it, doesn't mean it wasn't watching you.